All right, wrestling fans, welcome back to the Hall of Fame special here for the We Can't Wrestle podcast Hall of Fame. We want to thank Chad Austin for being with us in segment one with a great conversation about the Hall of Fame and his nominees and his expectations of the Hall of Fame, which were not all met, by the way. Aaron is still here with me.
Hey.
And we are joined by We Can't Wrestle co host Archie Mitchell.
What's up, everybody?
Now, Kyle was supposed to be here, but Archie said this is his time. This is his spotlight.
Yeah, I'm tired of Kyle stealing my spotlight.
Well, the truth of the matter is Kyle is trying to connect with us right now. We hopefully will be able to bring him in. If not, I have his nominees. We can discuss them, and then we could discuss them with him at a later time.
And then if Kyle doesn't show up, I'll tell you all the reasons why his people shouldn't have gotten nominated.
Well, from what I heard, and it was just a rumor, all of Kyle's nominees had non-finishes. And that's why Aaron's mad about them not being included.
And their shirts never had sleeves.
Right.
Never.
Right.
And none of them worked for the WWF.
Especially Juventud Guerrera.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate, with Archie joining us, we'll go over once again the guys that got in. We'll do that in just a few, so Archie can give his thoughts on those, and then we will go through also Archie's folks that he suggested should be on the ballot and his reasoning, and we'll discuss that. But first of all, the 20-person ballot was Dusty Rhodes, Roddy Piper, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Bruno Sammartino, Paul Heyman, Sting, Ricky Dozon, Gene Okerlund, Hulk Hogan, Stu Hart, The Undertaker, Terry Funk, Bobby Heenan, Jerry Lawler, Ric Flair, Steve Austin, Randy Savage, Vince McMahon Jr., and Andre the Giant. That was the 20-man ballot that was the initial ballot for the Hall of Fame that I gave to all of the panelists.
And a majority of mine did get on. So I'm not really upset.
Yeah, quite a few did. And then the 8 that got into the first class of the Hall of Fame: Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, The Undertaker, Bobby Heenan, Andre the Giant, Randy Savage, Vince McMahon Jr., and Steve Austin. Now let's go through those individually. And Archie, we can discuss your thoughts on that, and Aaron and I can reiterate maybe some thoughts that we had when we talked to Chad, and also maybe we've got something else to bring up. Hulk Hogan, Archie.
Well, look, I know I've made jokes about Hulk Hogan. I know I've said I'm not a fan, but you cannot have a Hall of Fame, whether it be physical or mental, without Hulk Hogan. You can't have a Mount Rushmore without Hulk Hogan. Mm-hmm. The man personified what professional wrestling was in the 80s and a greater part of the 90s. And still to this day, when he comes into an arena, whether it be for a WrestleMania or at the Legends Raw just now, he commands a big pop. So, by all means, I have no problem with this choice. Even though he was not on my list, I understand Hulk Hogan being voted in.
Well, it's like Chad said in our previous segment, whether he nominated Hogan or not, whether he was a big Hulk Hogan fan or not, Hulk Hogan is one of the guys that is the reason that you have a Hall of Fame.
Definitely.
And like I said earlier, to me, the reason I nominated him, the reason I had him on my list was simply, other than Austin, probably the biggest star in wrestling history.
Yes.
And he was the first, well, I guess, no, not necessarily, because of somebody that Aaron brought up on one of his lists, but in the modern times, not talking about Gorgeous George or Fred Blassie, Hogan was the first real crossover guy in the modern times,
Without a doubt.
I mean, I guess you could say Blassie, he was, back in the 50s, he was on the Regis Philbin show and et cetera. But for modern fans, modern times, Hulk Hogan was the first,
I mean, let's be honest. A casual wrestling fan, a full-time wrestling fan, or someone who just knows that wrestling exists. You say the name Freddie Blassie in front of a room of 20 people, and maybe 4 of them will turn around and go, I know who that is. You say the name Hulk Hogan, and all 20 people are going to go around and go, yeah, I know him.
Well, yeah, it's like I mentioned earlier in the show, there was in the 80s, somebody took pictures of Hulk Hogan and pictures of Ronald Reagan
Right.
to Africa. Everybody knew who Hulk Hogan was. Like 30% of them knew who Ronald Reagan was.
Right.
So there you go. I mean, it's a testament to the man's, and like Aaron said, he not only did he have a stellar career, but he actually technically kind of had two stellar careers. One is Hulk Hogan, one is Hollywood Hogan.
Right.
And
some will even argue that he got into his groove as a Hollywood Hogan because as a heel, he didn't have to pander. He didn't have to. I mean, he was still being Hulk Hogan, but he was being the real Hulk Hogan. Just like Bobby Heenan would say, this is what he wanted to be his entire career.
And I didn't mention it when we were talking with Chad and all that, but even going in he was Hulk Hogan, then he was Hollywood Hogan. Don't discount the fact that he went back after that, after Hollywood Hogan, back to the WWE and had been out of that company for 10 years and didn't miss a fucking beat.
Right. And even when he went back to being red and yellow Hulk Hogan, he still wore the feathered boa. He still had the black beard around his face, and he was still being Hollywood Hogan. But he was Hulk. It was still Hulk Hogan. And like I said, it was a testament because that's what the joke of the matter is. We all always say it. Hogan was always a heel. He raked eyes. He scratched backs. He did things behind the referees.
He wouldn't take Paul Orndorff. He was too good to take Paul Orndorff's phone calls.
Right. So
and you want to talk about to what Aaron was saying about his return to the WWE in 2002 and /2003. All you got to do is look at those reactions in Chicago and Montreal. What was it? The Montreal crowd cheered for 20 minutes or something. They had to edit SmackDown because they wouldn't stop cheering him. It was pretty much the old fashioned. You don't know what you got till it's gone.
Right. I mean, and he was in the ring with The Rock when that happened at WrestleMania 18, and the world exploded because they started that match off as Rocky, and then all of a sudden, the famous double turn. The Rock was getting booed, and here's Hulk Hogan getting cheered again, like if he never left. If he was the same guy. Like if you didn't rip our hearts out in '96.
Right.
You know what I mean? and we appreciated it. And it was, look, I will admit it, Hulk Hogan made me a fan. WrestleMania 6, Warrior and Hogan. I became a fan that day. As I got older, he got boring. But as he became Hollywood Hogan, I got interested again.
The first memory I have of pro wrestling is I was probably 5 years old. And this was, so it had been 83. He had literally this show, Hulk Hogan is synonymous with my wrestling fandom because the first wrestling I ever saw, he was on it. And he came back to WWF. It was before Backlund lost the title. I didn't know who Bob Backlund was. I didn't care who 5-year-old me didn't give a shit who Bob Backlund was.
Nope.
But I knew there were these nasty Samoan guys that were on the show.
Right.
Hulk Hogan teamed up with Bob Backlund to face the Samoans on the first wrestling show I can remember watching. And when I met Hulk Hogan, funny story, when I met Hulk Hogan, I told him that. And you know what he said to me? I don't even remember that, brother. So, I mean, that stuck out in my head,
I went back as a kid, obviously, because Blockbuster Video and smaller video businesses were, video stores were still around. And I can remember watching, I don't remember what video it was, but it was like a best of 1988 or something, but they were going back and reliving old memories. And they played a slower version of I Am a Real American, with a real slow start and a real, energetic, pump up. And they replayed him beating Iron Sheik for the title. And I had never seen that match yet. I still had yet to see it. And for some reason, 9-year-old me went, damn, I got to see that. And made my dad take me to the video store to find that, on tape. And watched it and went, oh my God. And I was like, wow, I'm enthralled with this guy.
Yeah.
And like I said, when I hit 12 or 13, it was like, okay, he's there, but I'd rather be a Macho Man fan or a Warrior or even a DiBiase fan.
Yeah, I mean, as you grow older, you become a fan of the heels.
Right?
You grow out of Hulk Hogan and you grow into a Ric Flair or a Mr. Perfect or what have you.
Well, that was the thing. By the time I was 12, Ric Flair's in WWE now, so it's like, okay, I'm cheering the guy I like.
Mm-hmm.
And then he never got that match with Hogan, which, again, I will always say this to this day, the WWE missed out big time, WWF, not putting them together. But Hogan and Flair being in the same company was still cool. Because you still got the promos against each other, them playing off each other, Flair helping The Undertaker beat Hogan for the title,
Right.
But then you hear the underbelly of it all, too. Hogan going back to the dressing room saying, Undertaker hurt me. So Vince took the belt away from Taker and didn't believe in him anymore. You realize that Hulk Hogan turned into a politician later in his career in the WWF before he left. And when you learn that, it's not about being a fan anymore. It's about looking at somebody going, wow, why couldn't you put that guy over? You put Warrior over at WrestleMania 6, but you didn't take a back seat to him. You were still running neck and neck. Nate, if right now you pass the torch to Aaron and say, here, you're running We Can't Wrestle anymore, right? But you're still on the show and you're still running the live and you're doing it. You didn't pass the torch to Aaron.
Right.
You just told him, hey, you're in charge. There's a difference,
I want to go take a nap.
Yeah, you can't tell me, oh, yeah, Warrior's the next Hulk Hogan, but then Warrior's a piece of shit because he left and Hogan's still the main guy, If anything, he should have passed it to Savage because Savage would have been more believable. But that's a story for another day.
You bringing up Flair, he's the next one, the next inductee into the Hall of Fame. And
he was on my list.
Yes, he was. And another guy that, no, he was not on your list, actually.
Yes, he was. I just looked at my list. Hold on. I'll go back to it right now.
Okay.
Point of contention.
Point of contention.
Hold on. I was joking. I was making fun of people. No way. There it is. Yeah, he was number 3. I had Undertaker, Bobby Heenan, Ric Flair, Randy Savage. Or wait, is that? Yeah, that was who I sent you.
Okay, that's who you voted for. That was not okay. I was talking about your initial list that you sent me of possibilities to be.
Oh wait, did I wait?
And I have that list, but yes, you did vote for him. Yes.
Oh yeah, I voted for him. There's a difference. Okay, yes. You're right.
No worries. But
it's more convoluted than a TNA match.
It's the reverse Hall of Fame.
The reverse Hall of Fame King of the Mountain Battle Royal on a pole.
I'm a Flair mark to this day. Although lately he's been looking like the Crypt Keeper. Ric Flair, the first time I ever saw him yell into a camera and say things like, I wear a $1,000 suit. I've got a $25,000 Rolex. Every friend of mine, and myself included, wanted to be Ric Flair. You know what I mean? We wanted to dress like him, act like him, the mannerisms, the everything. And it became a running gag that whenever any of us were at a wedding or an occasion where we had to have a suit on, we'd cut a promo on one another. Like whoever was dressed down or not as good as the other one would get a promo cut on them.
Then the other one would harass somebody in a closet.
Right.
Something Ric Flair did too.
Right. But I mean, pound for pound, one of the best wrestlers in my opinion. Took a bump better than anybody. And my favorite to this day.
I don't think it can be argued. Even though Ric Flair is not my favorite pro wrestler of all time, he's obviously in my top 10. Right. He's not my personal favorite pro wrestler of all time. I don't think, regardless of who your personal favorite is, you can ever dispute that he is not the greatest professional wrestler of all time.
I agree. And here's the thing: he worked for people, and what I mean by that, he bumped for them. Yes. He could have been going up against a greener than green, I just debuted rookie, and he would have made them look like $1 million.
Sting.
But I mean, at least Sting had years in the business before they actually clashed. But I've seen him in matches with tag team specialists like Ricky Morton, and he made me believe Ricky Morton was going to become the NWA World Heavyweight Champion that night. I've seen him against Nikita Koloff. I've seen him against Sting. I've seen him against Lex Luger, who, in my opinion, only Ric Flair got a good match out of Lex Luger. There were not many people who could have done a great match with Lex Luger. I feel Lex Luger was like a stiff board in the middle of the ring that didn't know how to bump. But Ric Flair somehow got a great match out of him every time. It's and then you take away the wrestling. Let's say Ric Flair never got in the ring a day in his life. If he would have just been a manager or a mouthpiece, the promos this guy cut, sometimes for no reason. He didn't have an opponent set yet.
Mm-hmm.
He'd get on the mic, and we're going to be in Marietta, Georgia on Monday. And then on Tuesday, we're going to be in Philadelphia. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be in Pittsburgh. And, and he'd be giving you this passion that you wanted to be at the show or at least watch it.
Yeah, there's a reason that during the territory days when Flair was the world's champion and he would go to Dallas or he would go to Louisiana or whatever, there was a reason that if they had Flair, that they featured Flair as many segments as they possibly could.
Right. Right. It wasn't just about the match that he had that night. It was about the promo he cut the day before, leading into the match, but then the story he told about what he was going to do after the match.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And
yeah.
As a kid growing up, I would always look at the screen and go, okay.
What's he going to do to those ladies?
Right. You're 10 and you're like, oh, okay, he's going out drinking. Okay, no big deal. And then you get a little older and you hit puberty and you're like, oh, he's going to party. Okay, great. And then you hit 15 or 16, you're like, this guy's bullshit. And he's probably sitting in his hotel room. And then you see all these shoot videos with all these people. And no, Ric Flair actually did what he said.
He lived the life. He lived the gimmick, brother.
That's what made him so cool. To this day makes him so. On Raw this past Monday, he actually helped Lacey Evans beat his own daughter. And all I kept thinking is that's Ric Flair to the T. For the last 40 years, Ric Flair turned on people you never expected him to turn on.
Mm-hmm.
So it was perfect,
The next guy on the list, the one and only, a guy that I definitely voted for on the ballot, and I actually nominated him as well, The Undertaker. I don't know that you can deny
first round Hall of Famer all the way around.
I just don't know that you can deny because one of the criteria for the Hall of Fame that I set forth was someone who was a top draw or a top guy in a territory or et cetera, just essentially consistency. And you talk consistency in the WWE, you got to talk about The Undertaker.
From the minute he stepped foot in an arena at Survivor Series, Roddy Piper yelled the famous line, "Look at that ham hock." Aaron mentioned it when we were talking about The Undertaker during our special about The Undertaker. And that line will go down in infamy as far as being exactly what The Undertaker was, just this big, monstrous-looking guy.
Mm-hmm.
You pan to the crowd as he was walking in that night, and kids were actually frightened. You know what I mean? And he was walking out with Brother Love, who was, up until then was a comedy guy.
Right.
And now he's got this monster with him, this undead zombie. But then, okay, he wrestles. He does things a big man shouldn't be doing, like scaling the top rope and walking over it, delivering jumping clotheslines. But then he throws you for the biggest loop. He's aging well. He's becoming a better character. Mm-hmm. It's not just about building the casket in the mortuary and spiking down these big nails with a hammer and having Paul Bearer cut his promos. No, he can cut a promo. And he doesn't have to be the dead man anymore. He could just be a biker rolling down to the ring with rock music playing, and you're still going to cheer.
Mm-hmm.
I can only say good things about The Undertaker. And I'll be honest, throughout his career, as I appreciated him, I wanted to find out more about him. He wasn't bad as Texas Red. He wasn't bad as the Master of Pain. And he wasn't bad as Mark Calloway either in WCW. They were just bad gimmicks. But he did what he was supposed to.
And in theory, the Undertaker gimmick is a terrible gimmick. It's a cartoon, one-trick pony gimmick, and like you were alluding to, this guy took it and evolved it, and made it his own. And Aaron and I have talked about it on the show before, where we've talked about the great gimmicks of all time. It's right up there with Aaron would tell you the Boss Man. Ray Traylor was able to evolve that character in many different ways.
Right. He wasn't just a police officer from Cobb County, Georgia,
The greatest gimmicks of all time, and there's 4 of them. 4. The Undertaker, the $1 Million Man, the Honky Tonk Man, and the Big Boss Man.
Agreed.
Greatest gimmicks of all time.
Agreed. Till this day, the Honky Tonk Man...
No, but they're the greatest gimmicks of all time.
Oh, without a doubt. Because they lasted over time. They were able to still be built on and made better and continue to grow. And The Undertaker, that's what The Undertaker did. It was almost like Vince McMahon gave him his gimmick and said, okay, I'm painting you into a corner. You figure out how to get out of that corner and get better. And he did it without stepping on any of the paint or making any tracks, or he blazed a trail. And I mentioned it with the Hogan segment that we just talked about. He beat Hogan for the title devilishly, thanks to Ric Flair, and then he went like 4 or 5 years without touching a world title. And then he didn't
get the title again until 97 when he beat Sid.
Right. WrestleMania, what was that? WrestleMania 14? 13? Right. And, then he gets the title, and I think he only held it for like 2 months, drops the belt. But then as he got older, that's when Vince finally said, yeah, here's the belt, do what the hell you want with it. You know what I mean? And he got better with it.
He and Steve Austin actually talked about on the Broken Skull sessions, like 30 years in the WWE, and you were only the world champion 6 times or something like that, and Taker's pretty much like, I didn't need it, and he's right. His character, he did so good with that character. It's like I told Aaron and Chad in the last segment, you talk about these since what, I don't know, let's say since WrestleMania 23, since they discontinued going to arenas, you talk about these huge stadium WrestleManias that sell out every single year. One of the biggest attractions, one of the biggest draws in those WrestleManias was the streak. Yeah.
It had nothing to do with a belt. And when it did have to do with a belt, the streak personified the
yeah.
It wasn't about the belt anymore, There were 5 or 6 WrestleManias where he main evented without a title.
Right.
He went on last because they gave him that respect, and they wanted him and his opponent to feel like they had time to do what they had to do.
Exactly.
It's his matches with Shawn Michaels, bar none, some of my favorite, whether it was Bad Blood in the Hell in a Cell or their 2 Mania matches. Another guy who got good matches out of people, except for his match with Goldberg in Saudi Arabia. But how could you not be, if you're not an Undertaker fan, at least one point of his career, then you don't really watch wrestling to be a fan. You watch it just to critique it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Bobby Heenan,
my favorite all-time manager, and always will be. If I had to put together a top 5 of the best managers, in my opinion, it would be Bobby Heenan, Jim Cornette, Jimmy Hart, Paul Heyman as Paulie Dangerously, obviously not as Paul Heyman.
Mm-hmm.
And number 5 would probably be Sherry Martel.
Mm-hmm.
And she was more of a valet, but she was still a manager too.
Sherry was a goddamn manager.
Yeah, so
yeah, she was a manager. She didn't have a dick. She was a manager.
Bumped. The difference between a manager and a valet is a valet doesn't bump.
Right.
Sherry bumped.
Right.
She had a bigger dick than Harvey Whippleman.
And Harvey knew it too. He personified being a heel. He made being a heel cool. And you hung on his every word. I mean, Aaron and I, how many shows have we watched where we've done like reviews of different pay-per-views and things, where Aaron and I have traded Bobby Heenan lines that were delivered that night because of how impactful they were on the show.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? One of my favorite lines is when he's arguing with the Red Rooster, and the Brooklyn Brawler comes out and beats the crap out of the Red Rooster, and then he says, "You're a nobody, but I went out there and found a bigger nobody than you, and he's going to be the best nobody he could be." And Brawler's like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Wow, wow," It's Bobby Heenan though. You can't ever really be mad at him. I remember when Hogan turned at Bash at the Beach, and Bobby ruined it, as some people say, because here comes Hogan, and Tony Tron, "It's Hulk Hogan!" And Bobby Heenan go ahead.
I've always disagreed with that.
No,
sentiment.
I agree too.
I've always disagreed with that sentiment that people say Bobby ruined it.
No,
I don't think Bobby ruined it. I think Bobby Heenan knew his character.
And his character always doubted Hogan.
He knew that no matter how much his character supported WCW in the war with these outsiders, he knew Hulk Hogan was a piece of shit. So Hulk Hogan's always been a piece of shit. He was true to his character.
So when Bobby lays that line out,
I've been telling you dick suckers this for 27 years.
But but whose side is he on?
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, at the time I was 14, 15. And I'm like, it's just Bobby Heenan. It's Hulk Hogan. He's coming to save the day. And then he dropped the leg, and Bobby Heenan's like, "I told you." And I'm like, damn, he did.
I love Dusty's response to that, because Bobby's like, "Whose side is he on?" And Dusty Rhodes is like, "What are you talking about, Bobby Heenan?
Shut up, Bobby Heenan." Right.
Jacques Sue, Bobby Heenan.
So it just, everything Bobby Heenan did in his career, even, I don't remember Bobby Heenan ever being a face. Even when they inducted him into the Hall of Fame, he went in as the heel Bobby Heenan.
Oh, he healed on his wife.
Right.
Those people cheer his wife, and he goes, "Hey, you haven't tried the meatloaf."
Right. I mean, it's just.
And his daughter, he healed on his daughter. Because he was like, "This is my wife, and my daughter and her son. Everybody stand up," and he told his family to stand up, and he goes, "There's my wife and there's my daughter," and his son-in-law was sitting down, and he was like, "This is my daughter, this is my son-in-law." Apparently, she married a midget because the kid didn't stand up.
Right.
So, yeah. And my son-in-law laughed, like he was like, "Ah, shit."
I never
got me or whatever, but
whether he was commentating with Gorilla Monsoon, Tony Schiavone, or whether he was just shooting the shit in an interview with Mean Gene, Bobby Heenan was the best of the best, in my opinion.
Andre the Giant.
I don't disagree with this. Andre the Giant deserves to be in any Hall of Fame. But here's the thing, and I'm not saying I'm not a fan. I am a fan of Andre the Giant. But I only knew older Andre.
Right.
You know what I mean? I never got to go back, which I should, but I never got to go back and watch the younger Andre with the afro and the way that he would just step out into the arena and they would explode for him. You know what I mean? I again started watching at WrestleMania 6. By that time, Andre wasn't wrestling anymore. So when I went back and watched WrestleMania 3 and the build up to it, I only knew heel Andre. So it was whatever Bobby Heenan proclaimed for him to be is what I thought he was, but he deserves it.
What I will tell you is, and I mentioned this in our previous segment. I mean, I knew a lot about Andre as far as the WWF goes, and then Mid-South, because he would make appearances down in Mid-South. But I recommend to anybody that is a wrestling fan to read the new Andre the Giant book, because I'm going to be honest with you, I learned so much about I mean, through the late 60s and 70s, how important he was to the business in United States, in Canada, especially Japan, Europe.
Right.
Just it unearths things and scratch. You haven't even scratched the surface.
That's what I want to see.
Andre in the 80s,
I want to see Japan Andre because I hear nothing but amazing things about it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I've read a few things about it, and I've seen pictures, but I've never actually watched. So, and I love Japanese wrestling, so I think if anybody would have fit in, as they call it, as a gaijin down there, I think Andre definitely would have fit in. I loved him in The Princess Bride. I think he was a fantastic actor. You know, and like I said, definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. But
Do you want a peanut?
Do you want a peanut?
I love the story Rob Reiner tells about how Andre, they're sitting there one time and during shooting, and Andre just rips the biggest fart on the planet. And Rob Reiner looked at him and went, "Are you okay?" And Andre goes, "I am now, boss." All right, the next one on the list, Archie, and I actually, as much as he's literally my favorite wrestler of all time, I don't see this man using the credentials we used as a first ballot Hall of Famer.
I didn't hear you mention Ronnie Garvin's name on your list.
He, to me, you can tell me if you disagree, he was never... Randy was amazing. I want to say what I want to say without shitting on him at all, because I don't want to shit on him. But he was always, in a way, the supporting character, I guess. And
to an extent, yes.
And again, I mean, in the criteria we did talk about promo skills, we did talk about in-ring ability, and absolutely there. But just, I don't know, for me, I didn't vote for him.
Well, this is why I'll disagree with you. Randy is like a 1A, 1B with Ric Flair for me. They're both my two top favorites.
Mm-hmm. And
seeing them go against each other in both WWF and WCW was amazing because they got great matches out of each other every night, you know. Randy Savage, one of the best promos I've ever seen, whether it be his cream of the crop promo, whether it be his Hogan's Got Lust in His Eyes promo for Elizabeth, or whether it just be him going completely and utterly psycho in WCW and managing Mongo and Kevin Green. You know what I mean? Every promo was gold for me. Mm-hmm. He never minced his words or messed up a line.
To what Archie's saying, anybody that listens to the show that is not, you know, we have younger listeners that, mm-hmm. you know, if you want to see one of the most realistic, crazy good promos you've ever seen in your life, you go watch Randy Savage's promo after the match at this Tuesday in Texas pay-per-view.
Yep.
He's on the ground. He's retching. It's his eyes and just it just, you can't look away. You can't look away, and it just captures you. You know.
That's the whole thing of it too. The realism again. We mentioned that the Undertaker lived his character and grew it. Granted, Randy Savage didn't really have a gimmick other than being an egotistical maniac, which was great about him. Mm-hmm. But he grew that character, you know, from just wearing a robe to then coming out with a big cowboy hat and the full-on outfit. You know, the realism that was his entire feud with Jake the Snake Roberts, mm-hmm. the snake biting him, seeing Elizabeth crying, Jake smacking Liz during one of the matches. Trying to take her head off with a chair, leading to the Undertaker feud. Randy Savage grew more and more as a character. And then on top of that, see, this is why I'll say he wasn't a supporting character. WrestleMania 4, he becomes World Heavyweight Champion. And Vince McMahon trusted him for one full year to hold that belt and make the storyline with Hulk Hogan that full year till WrestleMania 5. Mm-hmm. When he got it back from Flair, he didn't lose it again. He kept it for quite some time before dropping it to
Flair. He left it back to Flair.
Back to Flair, but not immediately. They had a feud. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? With then leaving to WCW, again, they gave him the ball almost a year after him being there, and he battled the Giant and Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. And granted, most of it he looked like a lunatic because he was just beating the crap out of people. But Randy Savage.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's a different subject for a different time, but I actually liked Randy Savage versus Ric Flair better in WCW than I did.
I did too.
WWF.
I did too, because they made that storyline even better than WWF did. You know, the storyline of Ric Flair was with Elizabeth, and no, Elizabeth is a pure woman. That was, you know, she never was with anybody but Hogan. You get to WCW and you find out, wait, Elizabeth is with Ric Flair. So maybe back in WWF all those years, she was with Flair.
Trifling,
you know,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she had lust in her eyes. You know what I mean?
But the baby's arm holding the apple.
Well, I don't think we can deny the next guy either, Archie, and that's Vince McMahon Jr., because we would not have the wrestling business that we have right now today.
I agree.
Without the foresight and genius of Vince McMahon before he went batshit crazy 10 years ago.
He gets a lot of shit for the stuff that he does today, like ripping up the script an hour before they go on air and things. But forget about what he's done over the last 10 years. What did he do for the last 40 years? You know what I mean? 1984, he took over the company.
He actually took over in 82.
82, but they didn't actually name him the head of the company till like a year later or so.
Right.
And then a couple of years later, WrestleMania. And we talked about this when we did the house show that we reviewed a couple of weeks ago. They didn't know if WrestleMania was going to be big. They kept promoting it, one and done. This is it. You'll never see another show like this again. Well, guess what? We're coming up on WrestleMania 37.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you know, the most telling thing I always say about Vince McMahon, the one thing that made me see what type of businessman Vince McMahon was and how much he loved this business and wanted it to grow, was a promo, but I know it came from his heart when he delivered it. The night that he bought WCW on Raw, he walked out in front of the arena and he was rattling off a bunch of names of guys he was going to fire and hire and keep on. And then he looked dead into the camera and he said, you know, people always ask me, how do you compete with a billionaire like Ted Turner and win a war? How do you compete with a billionaire? And I told them all, you become one. Vince McMahon is legitimately a billionaire to this day now. And yeah, he's lost and won money and gotten money and whatever. But
and then 20 years later, he put on some Eddie Cantor makeup and went out there and looked like a fucking human puppet.
Bye, Taker. Goodbye.
Yep.
And it's like, how did he actually became Al Jolson? What the fuck?
He definitely shouldn't appear on camera anymore. I'll be honest. It's scary to look at Vince McMahon to this day. It's like looking at an elderly great grandparent that you maybe have in a home that you haven't seen for a few months.
Like the puppet from Goosebumps.
You know, but
last and certainly not least, I don't know another guy. I don't know that you can deny this guy's not a first. I mean, we talked about Hulk Hogan at the top, and I guess this guy would arguably be the only guy that was ever a bigger star than Hulk Hogan, and that's Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Well, I agree with him. I agree with him being in the Hall of Fame, Nate. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, that is always a debate, you know, Hogan or Austin. And here's my thing what I say is I think that a couple of things. When Austin, and I talked about this earlier during our last segment, Austin kind of had two careers in that he had the technical expertise wrestling career as Stunning Steve Austin, and then Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I think that had he been able to hit his stride earlier than he did, you know, because of his injuries and stuff, he may have actually been He may have actually been able to have as good a run as Hogan. I guess not as good a run, but as long a run.
Long.
But
There's right.
Yeah, if you actually look at it, he made more money than Hogan in a shorter amount of time.
Right. Well, see, there goes it. See, people will always argue that if you look at the timelines, it went Hogan, Austin, and then Cena.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the three guys that that were the main guys in wrestling for their timelines, and that's true. But Hogan spanned mid 80s to 97, 98 was when the NWO finally cooled off, and you didn't see Hogan that much on WCW, except for when he was doing something stupid like the finger poke of doom.
Right.
But then he came back to WWE, and he got that rejuvenation for another 2 years where they even gave him another world title run, So you maybe say Hogan had a good 12 years in the business of nonstop success.
And I think another thing that, excuse me, I think another thing that hurts, or I don't want to say hurts, I think another thing where that time comparison, I try not to think about it, is that by the time Austin was done, his body was done.
Well,
it's not that he left because you know what I'm saying. Like he didn't.
No, I agree.
His body didn't give him the opportunity that Hogan's body did. And I'm not saying Hogan didn't take his bumps. And I mean, he deals with his hip problems and knee problems and back problems and everything now. But yeah, I mean, and again, it's a big debate, and I don't know. I don't necessarily have the answer.
Well, here's the thing. You see, like Hogan was obviously Terry Golden and, Terry the Hulk Bolea and all that before he became Hulk Hogan. But then he boomed and he stayed on top. But he stayed on top because of political power and pulling the creative control aspect of his career in WCW. Austin, of course, Attitude Era. That's when he boomed. But he was stunning Steve Austin. He was Steve Williams for a little while in Texas and things like that. And I think if they would have handed him the ball in WCW after Flying Brian Pillman got injured during the Hollywood Blondes thing, maybe we would have seen a WCW world title run for Austin. But he got his boom in WWF for a solid, 5 or 6 years. And he's mentioned that he made, more money or just as much money as Hogan in a shorter period of time. But also, Austin had more success in that period of time. What do I mean by that? Well, he won just as many titles as Hogan did in WWF in just a shorter period of time, 6 years versus 12. On top of that, Austin didn't start using his political powers to that last year he was in WWF when he refused to put Brock Lesnar over. Which, he didn't want to put Lesnar over. No big deal.
Well, I will disagree on that.
What?
He put the kibosh on Billy Gunn and Jeff Jarrett back in '99.
Well, yeah,
and he didn't want a job to Hunter either. That's why Mick Foley won the title match at SummerSlam '99.
Yeah, but at least he jobbed to somebody. See, here's the difference. Billy Gunn and Jeff Jarrett getting the Austin rub might not have been big in either, though. I mean, Jarrett would have still went on to do TNA, and Billy Gunn would have been in AEW with his bullshit sons.
Now here's where I will counter that. I'm just playing devil's advocate, and then we'll go to your. But what if Bret Hart had said that about Steve Austin in '97? That kid ain't gonna get over.
Well, but look at the difference, though. How many of the Austin Bret Hart matches did Austin actually win? Because if you think about it, 2 matches that they did have before Austin became champion and did everything he was going to do, Bret won.
Right.
Granted, Austin passed out in the sharpshooter, and it made him bigger, and we had that again a double turn. But Bret, pulled political power too. That's neither here nor there. My point is, Hogan refused to put anybody over unless they forced him to, and then he won the belt back the next night. Like Hogan beat Lex Luger. Lex Luger beat Hogan for the title when he was in the NWO. Luger held the title all of 2 weeks and then lost it back to Hogan. You know what I mean?
We will talk about that sometime.
Yeah, but my point is, Austin's career,
what I was going to say on that Hogan Luger thing. I'll just say it really quick, and then we'll put a Post-it note to talk about it later.
Right.
That is one of the dumbest title switches of all time.
It made no sense.
Well, and you are literally you're building tension for a year about Sting and Hogan.
Right.
You're trying to get to Sting being the guy that finally beats the evil Hulk Hogan for the title, and in the middle of it, you have Luger beat Hogan for a week. It was fucking stupid. But anyway,
did Hogan need a vacation? We just don't know. But
can I say something on the Brett Steve thing?
Yeah.
Brett lost, or Brett beat Steve the way you're supposed to beat somebody.
Well, no, I agree. He didn't.
Every time Steve Austin lost to Bret Hart, every time Steve Austin lost to Bret Hart, Steve Austin came out
looking stronger
at the end of it.
I agree. You're absolutely right.
I just heard you say that like Bret pulled some, and Bret's not even in the like Hall of Fame discussion that we're talking about. I don't think that was Bret being a politician. I just think that was doing what was right for business, and that's just my opinion on it.
No. I agree. It's just my point was when Austin pulled politics, it was because Brock is still green. I don't need to put him over. He doesn't need my rub. And you wanted me to put over Billy Gunn and Jeff Jarrett. I think he would have rather put over Kurt Hennig.
And I honestly, the thing I'll give Steve Austin, out of all the people he never put over or refused to put over, I'll give him a pass on the Jeff Jarrett, and that's because I've heard the story from Steve Austin multiple times. It's never changed that Steve Austin was in the Memphis locker room where nobody was making any money, and Jeff, after everybody got their payoff, Steve Austin was sitting there looking at it, and Jeff Jarrett looked at Steve Austin in the Memphis locker room and said, "You can keep staring at it all you want, but it ain't going to get any bigger."
True.
So now if I'm the main eventer of WrestleMania 14, and I'm selling more fucking t-shirts than anybody else on the fucking planet, and I'm looking at this guy, I'm gonna be like, you know what? Fuck him.
Right.
So good for him on that situation.
I agree. Nate, I need like a 5-minute break real quick.
That works. You
want to keep going, or you just want to send another? I mean, I'm going to be 5 minutes at the most.
Yeah, I'll just send another link.
All right, sounds good.
Okay.
Be right back.
It'll be easier for me to edit that way.